may be seated. I'm going to read an article to you here in just a moment, but we live in a world that is grasping for a spiritual experience. So remember that word. We live in a world that is grasping for spiritual experience, and if you believe reports and statistics and just what other people say, they would tell you that millennials are leaving the church. But the thing is, they're still looking for a spiritual experience. And that should grieve us, that we will see children graduate high school, we will see them graduate college, we will see them move into college, we will see them move into the workforce, we will see them move into making new lives, new families, and they may skip out, they may leave the church, but they are still desperately looking for a spiritual experience. And we need to be aware that may happen. But there is a difference in an experience, and there's a difference between an experience and an encounter with God. And I'm going to show you that over the next few moments as we move through this. But we hear about people that are leaving the church, but they do not leave or give up looking for spiritual experience. It is still very prevalent. Deepak Chopra, if you're familiar with him, maybe you are, you should be aware of him is what you should be. He is a Hindu spiritualist, but he has authored many books. He spent 3 days, a couple of years ago, I believe it was, leading a workshop for graduating MBA students from Columbia University. So you have a Hindu spiritualist, a person who is very far away from God. He is actually going to a university that was founded for preachers. It's ironic. It is very ironic that he is there. But you see this happen in all of these Ivy League and former schools, university that were founded maybe as a seminary or founded to train preachers. But Columbia was started as a college to train preachers, and as a matter of fact, it was even started by a missionary from England who came over here and started the university. But when Deepak Chopra was there, he was there with about 65 students, and they were in meditation with him on this one day. Deepak Chopra is a spiritual guide for Lady Gaga. He's a spiritual guide for Oprah Winfrey. He's a spiritual guide for many other stars. But he told them, he said, bring your awareness into your heart and ask, who am I? Then he started to pray to these Hindu goddesses. And he asked the students, he asked the graduates, those with MBAs from Columbia, this very prestigious university, he asked them to diagram the spiritual meaning that they had come into, that they found in their souls as they were in this Hindu prayer meditation time. See, these were MBA students at Columbia University who sat through this nonsense. These were not kindergartners who were suckered into sitting on some kind of prayer rug to receive a couple of goldfish snacks after it was over. So millennials, other generations, people are still looking for a spiritual experience. There is a draw in the spiritual realm. We need not discount that. So they did that because they were looking for that. what the world needs. That the world looks for an experience, but what the world needs is an encounter with Jesus Christ desperately. See, there's a difference in an experience, and there's a difference in having an encounter with Jesus. Jonathan Edwards said it like this, but he used honey as his illustration. He said, "I can show you honey. I can let you look at it. You can ooh and ah over its beautiful golden hue, the way the light bounces off parts and penetrates parts and radiates a beautiful glow. And I can tell you that it is sweet, and you can believe that it is sweet when I tell you it is. But unless you have tasted it, you don't truly know that it is sweet. You can believe it is sweet because I told you, but believing honey is sweet doesn't mean you really know it is sweet. I could be lying to you. You only truly know honey is sweet when you have tasted it." There's a difference between an experience and an encounter. There's a difference between looking at honey and eating honey. When you eat honey, you know it is sweet. When you have had an encounter with Jesus Christ, you know that there is a difference. Now here, let me tell you, this Jonathan Edwards, he's a long time ago. You never met him. Maybe you've read about him. Maybe you know about him. I'm going to tell you about my family, okay? Here's how it would have been for us. When our kids were babies, when they graduated from formula, they moved to cereal, and they moved into Gerber baby food or something like that. You know, they moved into baby food. And you feed the baby food, and they have banana pudding baby food. They have other stuff that's a little more yucky, carrots. That stuff's just yucky. I don't know if they ever ate that. But then you move into something called blueberry buckle, right? You move into the blueberry buckle. And when you move into blueberry buckle in the Gerber baby food, you have a fight over the baby and the parent about who's going to eat the blueberry buckle, because it's worthy to be eaten on its own. And when the baby experiences blueberry buckle, the baby wants more blueberry buckle. And that's the thing here. You can have an encounter. You can have an encounter with Gerber baby food. You can have an encounter with peas or carrots or banana pudding. But when you experience blueberry buckle, you know you've had something good. That's the same way with Jesus Christ. You can look for an experience all 7 days of the week, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. You can look for an experience during the day, during your life. But when you have an encounter with Jesus Christ, you move away from that changed. An encounter changes a person, and they know what they want the next time. The next time the jar of blueberry buckle comes out, you can skip everything else. Just go straight to that. That's what the child wants. That should be us. Skip all the peripheral. Skip all the secondary. Skip all the other distractions. Move straight to the thing that your heart desires. That's Jesus Christ. So there's a difference. There's a difference between an experience and having an encounter. And if there was ever a guy who experienced an encounter with God, you could say Jacob did. Genesis chapter 32. Now here we just sung Standing on Holy Ground, and I thought maybe we were supposed to still be talking about Moses. And I really thought maybe I was supposed to bring another Moses message as we sang that song right there. But we're not. For the summer months, we're moving past Moses. We're moving into the study of prayer. And that's what we're going to be looking at right here for the next several weeks. But you move into Genesis chapter 32, and you talk about a guy who has an encounter with God. But that encounter, he has numerous. This story, the story of Jacob here, he has one spiritual experience after another, actually. He's going to come to an encounter. He's going to end up with an encounter with God. But in the beginning here, you see one spiritual experience after another. You're familiar with the story of Jacob. You're familiar with his brother. You're familiar with the brother of how he deceived his brother, how he deceived Esau. And when he does that, what does his parents tell him? His mom tells him, you got to flee. You've got to go. You've got to leave here. We have deceived your father. Your brother you have the birthright now. Your brother will be looking for you. He is going to come after you. Now, Jacob's name means one to grasp. And that's what he did when he came out of the womb. He was grasping the heel. And that's what he did for his whole life up to a certain point. He grasped. He just continued to grasp. He was born that way, and all through his life, he is grasping after something. He was a deceiver. Jacob was a deceiver. But then he runs into his uncle here, and his uncle, he finds out, is even a bigger deceiver than him. When you think you're the top man on the totem pole, when you've got it all figured out, there's always somebody above you. There's always somebody that can do it better than you. There's always somebody that can do something better than you, even if it's deception. So Jacob runs into a guy, his uncle, that can deceive even better than him, and he deceives him with his daughters. And you're familiar with the story. You're familiar with how he has to work for them. So Jacob ends up with Laban for 20 years. But in Jacob's life, he has these spiritual experiences along the way, but it doesn't change him. We don't see a change in his life until a certain point. Jacob is moved by these experiences, but he never goes to prayer. He never goes to thanksgiving. He never goes to prayer to God. He never has or exemplifies an attitude of change. So here we are in Genesis 32. Jacob has left Laban, and he is worried about meeting Esau. So verse 1. Now as Jacob went on his way, the angels of God met him. Now this would be an experience, wouldn't it? If you are leaving someplace, you're leaving here on your way to go home, and you come across some angels come out to meet you. The angels of God met him, they come out to meet you. You're going to say, well, that's an experience. I've had an experience with God. But it doesn't seem to change him. How many times have you had an experience? Have you sat in a service? You've read something. You've heard something. You've worshipped to some music, and you've felt an experience. You felt a movement, but it didn't change you. You didn't allow it to change you. You've done that. We've all done that. Jacob does that. He meets the angels of God. Met him. We don't really see much of a change. There's not a change until a little bit later that comes to him. You have these experiences in your life, but you sell them short, you give up on them, and you retreat back to what you were doing. You retreat back to the old way. When we're going to find out, when we grasp on to something and hold on to it for dear life, and when that thing is God, we're going to find ourselves having an encounter. And we're not going to want the secondary. So he has an experience right here in verse 1. But it doesn't seem to change him. Verse 2, Jacob said when he saw them, "This is God's camp." So he named the place Mahanaim. So here's an experience, but he needs an encounter. And it's not till verse 9. Jacob said, he prays. In verse 9, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. Verse 10, I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and of all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant, for which my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 companies. So hold on. Jacob starts out. It looks like he starts out like he's on the right path. Like he's doing, oh God of my father Abraham. Father Isaac, you said to me, return. I'm unworthy of all the loving kindness, of all the faithfulness which you have shown to me. That's good. That's a good prayer of thanksgiving. You want to see how to start out your prayer? You want, well, I don't know how to get my prayer started. That's a good way right there to start your prayer. I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy of your loving kindness. I'm unworthy of your forgiveness. I'm unworthy. That's a good way to introduce, to come into a prayer time and humble yourself before God and allow Him to move into your life. So it seems like Jacob's going to do a good job right here. He has thanksgiving. He has confession. He models that. But then what does he say at the end of verse 10? He begins out by saying, I'm aware something's wrong in me. I'm aware that I need to have thanksgiving. I'm aware that there needs to be confession in my life. I'm aware that I'm a sinner. I'm aware that I fall short. I'm aware that all men have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I'm aware that it's nothing in my own ability that I can do that can make me in a right standing before a holy God. That's a good way. That's a good way to move into a prayer time. But then he still struggles. He moves from saying, I have something wrong with me, but he still has this struggle with self, because at the end of verse 10, it says, For with my staff only, I held in my hand only this staff, and I crossed. I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. There's two groups of us. I've divided us. I've separated us. He's moving them, he's put them in two companies for a reason. We'll see that in just a second. He says, I did this. I got us to where we are. It was by my strength. So Jacob has a problem. Now, he started out well. He had confession. He had thanksgiving. But then he reverts back to what he did. This is what I've done. I've done this, God. God, you should be thankful that I'm at church today. God, you should be thankful that I sung in the choir. God, you should be thankful that I gave a little bit of an offering as the plate went by. God, you should reward me. You should do something for me because I've done something little for you. See, you can sit in a church service and you can have a warm, fuzzy experience, but until you have an encounter and realize you need God to change your heart, you don't know Him. Your name can be on a church roll. You can attend every time the doors are open. You can say, well, I feel good leaving church today. I felt good during the song service. I like those songs we sang. They really moved in me. They really stirred my heart. But what are you going to go back and do? When you go back, when you release that, when you let go of that and go back, you're missing the encounter. What you really need is an encounter with Him. So verse 11, he says, deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. See, Jacob's on his way home, just like he was told there. And we read, he's on his way home, but he gets word that Esau, his brother, is coming. He says, for I fear him, that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. So Esau's coming. He gets word. Somebody's been on ahead of him. They come back. Hey, Esau, your brother, is up ahead. He's coming this way. Not only is he coming, but he's got 400 men with him. He's got a group with him. He's got an entourage with him. He's got some bodyguards with him. So Jacob is terrified about this. He says, deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother. What is my brother going to do to me? God, I come to you in this prayer. So he's terrified of his brother. So what's Jacob going to do? He's worried about how his brother's going to treat him. He's worried because he has lied to him. He has stolen from him. He has tricked him. So Jacob is going to send a couple of waves of livestock, a couple of waves of servants on ahead. Maybe I can slow Esau down. Maybe I can butter him up. Maybe I can break through to him. Maybe this will be compensation to him. As I bring this livestock, as I bring some servants, as I present them as gifts to him, maybe I can soften him up a little bit so he'll let me live. And he'd already said, he says, I've become two companies. He says, I've divided my family into two camps. This is what Jacob has done. And we still see his selfish nature in this. He says, I've divided my family into two camps. He's thinking if one of the groups of my family dies, surely they won't be able to attack both groups of the family. Maybe one of the families, maybe one of the groups will live. And where is Jacob? You read in there, you find out that Jacob is positioned at the very back. Jacob has put himself at the very back. That's how afraid he is of his brother. He comes to this river, he's eventually going to send his two wives ahead of him, and he's going to be alone. You think that's a good place for Jacob to be, alone? He's alone right now. He's fearful, he's running, he's worried, he's terrified. He's dividing his family up, he's sending livestock, he's sending his servants on ahead as gifts, and now he is all alone. Verse 24. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. So it's dark. It's dark out there. Maybe Jacob was on the other side of this river. Maybe Jacob was on the other side, and he thinks, well, I can't light a fire right here. I can't build a bonfire to illuminate the area, to illuminate the night right here. I'm just going to have to sit out here in this pitch dark blackness. I'm just going to have to sit out here in this nighttime and not be able to see, because if I light a fire, Esau's going to see that fire and he's going to come after me. And I'm all alone. So Jacob is going to be all alone at night. He's going to have a wrestling match. There's going to be a man come that wrestles with him until daybreak. So he's in a dark place with his thoughts. Maybe he had thought, maybe as he's having this wrestling match, maybe he had thought about how he had wrestled for things in life. Maybe he thought, this is just like my life. I've been wrestling things away from people my whole entire life. Maybe Jacob had thought, I've lied over here, I've cheated over here, I've stolen from this person. But in the darkness, he is all alone, and what happens? God grabs him. In the darkness of his life, God grabs him, and God does to Jacob what he had been doing to other people his whole life. He grasped onto him, and he doesn't let go. He wrestles with him. And so Jacob's about to have an encounter with Christ right here. Jacob knows who this person is that he is wrestling with. He knows who it is, and we're going to see who it is here in just a moment, that God grabs him. There was when you have an encounter with something in your life, you change. When you have an encounter with God, your life changes. Going forward, your life is different. You should be able to recall that encounter you had. Maybe you walked an aisle. Maybe you stood up at a summer camp. Maybe you stood up during Bible school, or you knelt down on your knees at the foot of your bed with your parents, and you prayed for God to come into your life and the Spirit to reside there, and for you to have an eternal home in heaven. Maybe you remember that encounter right there when you were broken and you realized that you had a sin nature in you and that you were separated from God. And you remember the encounter that you had. Blaise Pascal, he was the one who invented the calculator. He worked in mathematics, he worked in physics, and many other things, and he is thought to be one of the smartest people ever. But he was a born-again believer. After his death, his assistant found a piece of paper stitched into his coat pocket. And there was a piece of thread. And come to find out, his assistant found out that every day Blaise Pascal would get up, he would remove that piece of thread and pull out this piece of paper, and he would stitch it back in to the jacket that he was going to be wearing that day. But it was a recount of his experience with Christ. Blaise Pascal, he wanted that experience with Christ to be close to him. He never wanted to forget where he had come from. He wanted to remember what he was before and who he became after that encounter with Christ. You know what? When I moved from secular workplace where I worked for 13 years in sales, industrial sales, and I moved into a church work environment, I saved all of those shirts that I used to wear to my old job. Why? Because I wanted to remember where I had come from. I did not want to forget what God had done in my life. So many times us believers have forgotten that Jesus Christ saved you from a devil's hell, and you're just basking in all of this freedom right now, and you forgot the miracle that actually occurred in your life. See, I didn't want to forget where I'd come from. So every time I walk into my closet and look upon that closet rack right there, I see those old shirts. I remember the journey that God has done in my life. But Blaise Pascal, his note inside his jacket pocket said this: in the year of the Lord, 1654, Monday, November the 23rd, from about 10:30 in the evening until 12:30, fire. God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not of philosophers. See, Blaise was a philosopher. Not of scholars. Blaise was a scholar, the best possibly ever. Certitude, feeling, joy, peace. God of Jesus Christ, my God and thy God. Joy, 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 tears of joy. Jesus Christ, I have fallen away. I have fled from Him, denied Him, crucified Him. May I not fall away forever. We keep hold of Him only by the ways taught in the gospel. I will not forget thy word. Amen. That was Pascal's record of his intense 2-hour religious encounter that he had kept secret until his death. But he wanted to keep it close to himself. He wanted to remember that for himself. An encounter with God begins in prayer. It begins with a prayer. It ushers in this time. When you call upon His name, He'll take it from there. Verse 25. So Jacob's left alone. There's a man there. He wrestles with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh, so that the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Jacob knows who he's wrestling with. And don't think God did not have the strength to prevail in this wrestling match. Do not diminish God's power. Possibly what this verse is saying is that the thing that we should be thankful for is that God does not deal with us in His full power. Think about that. When it says, here's what that word means when it says He touched his socket. He had not prevailed against him, but he touched the socket of his thigh. That touch means to yank out violently. It permanently did something in Jacob's life that he never recovered from. He had a limp for the rest of his life. He walked a different way. For the rest of his life, after encounter with God, he walked a different way. When you come to Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you should walk a different way. You have had an encounter. Be different. I should not see you out. You should not see me out somewhere and not be able to differentiate me from Sunday and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I should not be a different person during the week than I am here on Sunday. See, I took you out of it and said me, okay? You can hold me accountable. If you were here Wednesday night, you heard about my tennis match. You remember that? Remember that? I was good, don't worry. Verse 26. He said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. We're fixing to wrap this up. Isaac had 2 boys. Jacob is saying, I want a blessing right here. And he says, it's like he's saying, if you don't let me go, dawn's coming, but if you don't let me go, something's going to happen. Let me go. Dawn is breaking. But he says, I'm not letting you go unless you bless me. Isaac had 2 boys. It appears he loved one more than the other. It appears he had a favorite. You want division in a family? Have a favorite child. He appears that he has a favorite son. One, he would do stuff with one and maybe not do stuff with the other. He loved and identified one son, and he had little to do with Jacob. Jacob wanted the father's blessing. Can't you see that in that house? Can't you see the child that was maybe overlooked by dad? And while dad is on his deathbed right there, the child comes up with an idea, mom comes up with an idea to get the father's blessing, to get the father to say, son, I love you. Maybe Jacob had missed that his whole life. And it hurt. Maybe he was hurt. Maybe he was hurt by that. So much so that he wanted to lie or deceive just in order to hear the father pull his ear close to his mouth and say, son, I love you and I bless you. That's what Jacob really wanted. Jacob didn't really want the father's resources. He didn't really want the father's money. He didn't want the father's good. What Jacob wanted was for his ear to be close to the father's mouth to say, I love you, son, and to call him son. So all his life, he's been grasping at something. He's been grasping at wanting to be loved. So that night when God wrestles with him, God wants Jacob to answer the question for himself. Jacob, will you hold on to God, or are you just going to let go and go back to the way it was like every other time? That's the question for you. Are you going to hold on to God, or are you just going to let go and go back to what it was every other day? Will it just be another warm, fuzzy experience, or is it going to be a life-changing encounter? So Jacob says, I'm not letting go. I'm not letting go till you bless me. He says, I had a false blessing one time, but God, I'm not letting go of you this time until you move in my life and you give me a real blessing. God, it's not a blessing from somebody else I need in my life. It's a blessing, it's an encounter with you that I'm desperately in need of. So much so that God says, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he says, I'm not letting go of you, God, even if it costs me my life. Are you hanging on to God that dearly? Are you hanging on to God so tightly? God, I'm going to hang on to you so tightly, I do not care if it costs me my life. I am not letting go of you. Think about persecution. Persecution's too hard to handle, too heavy. I got to let go of God. I'm going to let go of God because I don't want people at work. I don't want people to think at work to think I'm some kind of fruitcake. I got to let go of God during the week because I don't want people to see me as some kind of oddball, as some kind of Jesus freak. So I'm going to let go of God. But Jacob says, I'm not letting go no matter what the cost. That's an encounter. That's an encounter. I'm holding on to you even if it costs me my life, because a life without God is not worth living. That's what he says. That's what you should say. God, a life without you is not worth living. Have you been living your life without him? Have you had an experience? Have you been having experiences? But it's time for an encounter. Is today the day for the encounter of God in your life? I'm going to ask you to bow your head, stand this morning. We're going to sing just a verse or so, two, of this last invitation.